Dustin Ranglak, who is now, I consider, a friend, and hope to do some sheep and coyote research in the future with him. And I'll go ahead and let him further introduce himself and talk a little bit about what they do. Okay, thank you, Dustin.
Well, thanks for having us here. As Chad said, I'm Dr. Dustin Ranglak. I'm the Utah Field Station leader and the Predator Project leader for an alphabet soup of an agency, the USDA, APHIS, Wildlife Services, National Wildlife Research Center. Wildlife Services, we're a federal agency, like I said, under the USDA. We operate in all 50 states, our operational side of things, the people who are actually out on the ground doing the work. And our whole goal is really to provide federal leadership and expertise in resolving human-wildlife conflicts. And that takes many shapes and flavors, from dealing with bird strikes at airports, dealing with wildlife diseases like rabies or chronic wasting disease, dealing with predators, which is what I do, feral hogs, you name it. Any sort of conflict that people could be having with wildlife, we are helping to deal with that. All 50 states, US territories, and military bases around the world. Anywhere where the US is present, we're there. And then we have kind of our research branch of that, which is the National Wildlife Research Center, which is what we represent. We're headquartered in Fort Collins, Colorado, but then you can see on these stars on the map here where we have different field stations. So I'm the Utah Field Station project leader. We're literally just 15 minutes away from here. And I wish that we would have been able to actually have you guys come out for a tour as part of this. That was the hope, but I am so short-staffed right now because of the different budget cuts that have been happening in the federal government that there was just no way we could make it happen, especially for a larger group. So maybe next time we'll be able to figure that out. So, but yeah, our research station is focused on predators. It was established in 1972. This is kind of an overview shot. So you can see these mountains that we're basically standing on taking this picture. Those are those on that side of the valley over here. And we're taking the picture looking out towards where we're at right now. So I have 165 acres right here where we sit, and we have 54 different pens. And established in the 1970s, the main predator that we were dealing with in the US, having conflicts with livestock, is coyotes. And so we have 97 captive coyotes on site that we use for research and trying to understand coyotes, coyote behavior, and how can we use that knowledge to keep coyotes away from sheep and away from goats and away from cattle, and also using our coyotes as surrogates for wolves and et cetera. We're now also combining that with field studies to make sure that the concepts, the ideas, the tools that we develop on site in a very controlled captive setting, which is really nice for the science, we got to make sure that it actually works in the real world, right? When we go out and there's all sorts of other things that are coming into play here. Historically, we've been focused on mammalian carnivores, so coyotes, wolves, more recently bears, mountain lions. But we're also going to hear from Dr. Lindsay Perry here in a little bit. We just hired her to focus on avian predators as well, because that's becoming a real big issue. And I know especially in the sheep industry with solar grazing and everything else, this is becoming a bigger problem, right? So our job is basically to develop management tools, right? We all have a toolbox that looks like this. Hopefully it has more than just, this is a bunch of wrenches, right? But we need a whole variety of tools, because you have different tools for different jobs, right? And it's not that one tool is good and one tool is bad. It's just they all have their own purpose. And so we're here trying to develop different tools to meet all those different purposes. And in our non-lethal toolbox, we have a variety of tools that are for managing the predators themselves, right? We can build predator-proof fences to keep them out of an area entirely. Or we can use different repellents, visual or acoustic, doing things with sterilization or translocation, right? All of these are kind of focused on how do we manage the predators themselves and keep them away. We have other tools about managing the resources. So managing the cattle, managing the sheep, managing the goats, aggregate grazing, shepherding. So we have people out there on the landscape with them, night penning, disposal of carcasses and garbage so we don't have attractants that are bringing predators into that area in the first place. Livestock guardian animals are hugely important, right? And so it's this combination of these two different main types of tools, but then within that, there's a lot of variability. So why am I talking about non-lethal tools? Yes, I'm a guy up here who's got a man bun. I'm not some sort of like hippie, wolf-loving, predator-loving guy, right? I'm not against lethal tools. We have a lot of lethal tools in our toolbox. They take a little less thought to them, right? Like it's not that hard to figure out how to kill something. But beyond that, the non-lethal tools are a really important part of what we call an integrated management strategy, which is what Wildlife Services has always proposed, where we're using a combination of non-lethal tools to prevent conflict. And then when conflict is occurring or those non-lethal tools are no longer working, we come in with lethal removals after the fact, right? And that's our most effective way at reducing conflict, is this integrated strategy. And you've probably heard the saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure. These are nice sayings. In general, I believe in them, right? But there's also this like biological reality that underpins all of this, right? First, predators, whether we're talking about coyotes, wolves, mountain lions, whatever, they're territorial. They maintain a territory. And that's just a biological reality of how they function. But then also, we know that not all individuals kill livestock. There's differences in males versus females, females with young versus females without young, old animals, young animals, prime-aged animals, right? There's differences in all these as to how likely they are to kill predators. And then even within those groupings, there's individual differences. Some are more bold, some are more risk averse, right? And so some are just going to be more likely to cause problems and some are going to be less. So our non-lethal tools allow us to keep the good predators, and then because of their territoriality, they're going to keep out the bad ones, right? And so this is us using their biology kind of against them, right? And just to kind of illustrate this, you can imagine if this is your property where you have your sheep or your cattle or whatever it is, I assume sheep at the sheep meeting, right? You have a series of predator territories around you. And depending on the size of your property, you probably only have one predator territory that you're dealing with. There's one pair of coyotes or there's one mountain lion or whatever. Maybe if you have a larger piece, you might have multiple, but the concept is the same here, right? When we go in and lethally remove an individual, especially if we're doing this like preemptively or trying to prevent conflict beforehand, all that we've really done is we've created a vacuum. We've opened up that territory. Think of it like it's an empty apartment in an apartment building. Others are going to come and try to move in, right? And we're going to get this immigration of new individuals where now you have multiple. And it could be those immediately neighboring ones are trying to squeeze in, or it could be new dispersers coming in to try to take over that territory. And so you have a period of time where now instead of just dealing with one predator, you're dealing with multiple while they're all trying to figure out who is going to end up on top here, right? And who's going to take over. And in addition to that, I don't know if you could see those icons shrink, you're generally dealing with younger individuals now, because these are those dispersers who are trying to set up those territories. Those younger individuals are more likely to kill because they haven't learned how to hunt very well yet, right? And livestock are an easy target. So when we do this as like a preemptive strategy, often we're seeing increased conflict instead of decreased, because we've actually increased the number of coyotes that we have in that area, and they tend to be younger and they're going to kill more because of that. And there's other things that I could get into, like they actually will start reproducing sooner and they'll have larger litter sizes and all this other stuff that goes along with it. But we tend to see increased conflict in this case. And so if we can use our non-lethal tools, kind of cutting it off a little bit, that's okay. That can help to minimize this conflict in the first place, so that we're not having to create these territorial vacuums. But then if and when our non-lethal tools stop working, or if we end up where we're in the territory of one of those bad individuals, right? That's when we come in with our lethal options, right? It's worth it when we're having problems. It's not worth it when everything's okay, So that's why I'm talking about non-lethal tools, right? There's a lot of things that influence how effective a non-lethal tool is. I'm going to talk a lot about tool efficacy. There are different tools work better in different situations, and some tools work better than others in general, but there's not one single tool that I can point to that's going to be like, yes, that's the one that will work all the time in every situation, right? We have to use different tools depending on the type of livestock that we're trying to protect, depending on the size of the property, depending on the economics of it all. All of those go into it. Economics, like I mentioned, the easiest thing, build a predator-proof fence. Boom, bang, you're done. No more conflict, right? For our coyotes to keep them in, we build 8-foot fences with a 45-degree overhang that's 3 feet long, and then skirting underneath 3 feet so that they can't dig under. To build a fence like that around 30 or 40 acres, I can tell you is $750,000, right? Like I've looked into this recently. That's not cost effective, right? And so we got to think about other tools that are available to us that are maybe less effective, but make more economic sense, right? Because that all has to balance out. We look at the carnivore ecology, the behavior of the animals themselves. What is likely to scare them? What is likely to attract them? What's likely to repel them? How can we kind of hack their own biology and use that against them to make these things work better? And then there's also the attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions of the producers themselves. I can tell you for wolves, one of our best tools is what we call fladry. That's these red flags that are hanging here. You hang those around your pasture. It's on an electric fence line. They're spaced every 18 inches, every 11 inches if you're dealing with coyotes. They flap in the wind, and wolves are scared of it. They do not want to cross over that line of flags. And you get 60 to 90 days until they realize that those flags are not actually a threat. It's one of our absolute best tools. But the attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions of some producers, they're like, I don't want my place to look like a used car lot. Or what are my neighbors going to think? Are they going to think I'm some wolf-loving hippie now if I go and string this up, right? Like this is very conspicuous. It's very obvious. And so we have some difficulty getting people to use some of our tools, even though we know they're really effective. Like this works. But there's an attitude, a belief, a perception about it that kind of limits the uptake of this tool at times, right? We're seeing that change. People are becoming more accepting of this, but that's part of it. So our project is really looking at a combination of all of these things to figure out what tools are going to be the best. So I'm just going to talk about this tool efficacy. So what makes an effective deterrent when it comes to predators? Well, Stuart Breck and Jeff Schultz, along with some others, Stuart and Jeff are both part of our predator project. They did this really interesting paper talking about integrating robotics into wildlife conservation. And this sounds really techie and weird, but they really were able to kind of nail down, there are 3 things that really make an effective deterrent. Proximity to the predator. The closer you can get that deterrent to the predator itself, the more effective it's going to be, right? If I sneak up right behind you and yell bang or whatever, that's going to scare you a lot more than if I'm 100 yards away and I yell it, right? That proximity matters. Unpredictability. If it can be different every time, or at least switch up the way it behaves regularly, that gives the coyote, the wolf, whatever, less time to habituate to it and to figure out how it works and to realize it's not scary, right? And then adaptiveness. If it can respond to that animal and change the way in response to that animal in real time, that's much more effective. That's why when we have a person out there who's able to physically respond and adapt to whatever that animal's doing, that tends to be the most effective tool, right? So to test this, they took here out at our facility, they took these little, we took these little meat baits, the coyote's favorite treat, and then we were trying to protect them with the fox light. If you're familiar with the fox light, like it's just a flashing light that goes off periodically, but we stuck that on top of a remote control car so that we could kind of test how movement and motion impact the effectiveness of this tool. And so we had this inner protected zone inside one of our pens where we put 3 of these meat baits, and we said, all right, we're going to protect these meat baits. So think of these as your sheep, right? We're protecting these sheep here. we have our remote control car, and then we have an outer non-protected zone, and there are 2 coyotes in each of these pens. And so here's with that light only. Here comes the coyote. Light goes off. Coyote's, oh, what's this? Oh, not scary. Grab my meat bait and I'm on my way, right? He realized pretty immediately that this was not a threat. Now, my coyotes have seen every deterrent under the sun. Chances are a coyote out on the landscape that's never seen this before would have a little bit stronger negative reaction, but he's not worried about that at all. Oh, another flashy light thing, whatever. But when we add motion into that, so here, when the coyote enters that protected zone, this car's going to drive a loop. You can see the coyote's like, wait a minute, this is different. And he's watching it and he's learning. He's figuring out, okay, what is this thing doing? All right, it's not chasing me. I'll just circle around this way. And then, the video is starting over here, right? But he's not immediately just running away. He's watching, he's learning, he's figuring it out, but it is deterring him more, right? He is definitely more cautious because we have this unpredictability added in. And now we're going to go to an adaptive movement where when the coyote comes into that protected area, this car is going to charge at the coyote and try to scare him away. Woo! Cloud of dust, right? This coyote's not taking the time to stand around and learn. He's like, no, this is a threat to me right now. I have to leave. And so we can see with these different, where we have just our regular old flat fox light, adding some unpredictability to it, or adding some unpredictability and adaptiveness to it, right? All of these things change how effective that tool is. So if we look at these graphs, here we're looking at inside the protected zone versus outside the protected zone. And we're looking at our bait survival time in minutes. How long before they go and eat that meatball? And with just the light, you can see 5-10 minutes after we put it down and we get out of the pen, they're there, right? They're picking that up. They're not afraid of that. Adding that predetermined movement definitely increased our survival time. Like that was good, but they still figured it out, right? Because he didn't run away. He sat there and stood and watched and learned. But that adaptive movement, now we're going from 10 minutes to 200 minutes, right? This is lasting a lot longer. We're able to protect these meatballs for a lot longer time. So I'm not suggesting that you all go get little remote control cars and sit out in your pastures and drive them around to chase coyotes away, right? That's not effective. But this is giving us the baseline of an understanding of what it is that we need in order to build an effective tool. And it sounds crazy, but our Wildlife Services operational team, the National Wildlife Research Center, are now using one of these Boston Dynamics spot dogs to patrol a runway in remote Alaska, where there's enough air traffic that we need to be clearing the runway of wildlife on a regular basis, but there's not so much as to justify having a person out there doing it all the time. So this is a human health and safety issue, but we're able to kind of take these same ideas, right? So I want to talk about 2 new tools that we've developed for the toolbox that are kind of taking these ideas of unpredictability, adaptiveness, proximity into play to better deter these predators. The first is these flash tags. So this is a flashing ear tag. And the second is using drones. So this flash tag, it's just an ear tag that lights up. And literally this piece that's doing the lighting up, that's a piece that you can buy on Amazon, and it's meant to screw onto the valve stem of your car or of your bike so that when you drive at night, you look really cool, right? Like that's the whole idea. But exactly. I don't think it looks cool. My predecessor saw that and thought, man, what if we put that on an ear tag? So we literally glued these things onto ear tags, and we went out and put them on sheep. So here's what you can see what it looks like on a sheep. It's got a solar panel that charges it and also senses it for the light. So it only comes on at night instead of the day. And then it has a motion sensor. So when it moves, these ear tags start to light up. And so here, this video, you can kind of just see the flashing. This is a herd of sheep grazing along this hillside. But you can imagine for a predator comes in, sheep start to run, the coyote or the wolf or whatever is right in amongst it, and it all of a sudden lights up like a disco, right? That's going to be confusing. That's going to be disorienting. That's going to be right there, proximate to them. That's why we had this idea and thought it could work. So results, we put 1,700 of these things out on sheep and cattle in 9 different states, different suites of predators, some with just coyotes, some coyotes and wolves, some coyotes, wolves, and bears. First question we always get, there was no impact on sheep behavior. The sheep did not change the way they acted. It didn't seem to bother them. It didn't startle them to have those lights going off. They just kept going about doing their thing. 92.3% of the producers reported a reduction in predation, either that year compared to the previous year or them compared to their neighbors. They felt like they had fewer predations. So attitudes, beliefs, perception, this works, right? But then we had sites where we had really good quantitative data, and it significantly reduced the predation on ewes and calves by about half, right? Cutting your predation in half with having these ear tags. No difference in yearling and adult cows, probably because those are less vulnerable anyways, right? But it had really poor durability, as you can imagine, where we're gluing these things on. After 6 months, every single one of them looked like this, right? So we went in, we've done a redesign. We have a patent on this now, and we've partnered with a company called Herd Dog. They are now going to be making these and selling them to the public. And my understanding is this initial run is probably going to be a little bit more expensive as they get everything figured out. But subsequent runs, this is going to be less than $10 a unit. So we're going to be figuring out, our next research is, we've bought 3,000 more of these, waiting for a shipment. This should come around Christmas. We're going to put them out next year in different ratios. Do you need it on all of your sheep, or on 75%, 50%, 25%? How many do you actually have to buy, right? The economics piece of this. That's our next question. So drones. Drones work. They can be an effective hazing tool. I'm giving you that, the bottom line up front here. But there are limitations, and that's what our research is focusing on right now, is what are those limitations. So we started doing this with wolves in Southwest Oregon, where the rogue pack in 2022 was really causing a lot of problems. They killed 11 cows over like this 3-week period in July, back in 2022. So every other night they were killing a cow. That cow. Yeah, so this was a big problem. That's committed, yeah. Wildlife Services was called in to respond. We set up what we call Night Watch, where we have people out there in trucks, ATVs, using handheld thermals to be able to see when the wolves are coming in, and then we go and we haze them out. But we also added in a drone, because the thought was, if we could get elevation, if we can get up, have a thermal camera in the sky that we can look down, we'll be better able to see when those wolves are coming in. And we also might be able to actually use that tool, that drone, to haze the wolves away in the first place. And we got a permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to be able to do this, because wolves are protected. They're still listed under the Endangered Species Act in this area. And so there is no lethal option. It's non-lethals only. So here was our very first encounter with the wolf. So you can see this hot spot right there. That's a young wolf. We're flying up.
These thermals are so impressive.
Yeah, yeah. And the drone we're using now is even better. Like, it's like full 4K definition. Like, it's crazy. No, the animals are off screen. Yeah, they would be off screen over here. But you can see, here's this wolf. We're flying up to it, and we want to see how it's going to respond, because we're hoping it's going to be scared of this, right? Does this look like Snoopy? Right? We're seeing play bows. We're seeing it jump up. He is not afraid of this drone at all. We're thinking, oh man, this is not going to work, right? What are we going to do here? Pilot's immediately thinking, what are we going to do? But I love how you can see his footprints as he walks. Like, it's so cool what we were able to do here. He's not afraid of that drone. So immediately we're like, we got to change something up. So we went back and we got a speaker. We put a speaker on the drone, and we flew back out to this same wolf. He's coming in closer to our cows now. As we approach, you're going to see a lot of those same behaviors. You'll see when he spots the drone, he kind of stops, and then he's going to start. Yep, so he spotted the drone there. He's going to start walking towards it, get ready to do those same sort of play bows. But then through the speaker's attached to the drone, we're actually able to push a button on the controller. You speak on the controller, and it broadcasts that voice. They use this for search and rescue. So we're going to say, hey, wolf, get out of there. My timing was a little off. I apologize. But you can see suddenly he realized, oh, that's not some new toy for me to play with. That's people. I know what people are. Wolves have a long coevolutionary history with people for thousands of years. They know that people equals problems. And so he is out of there, gone. Let me get out of this place, right? So this was exciting that we were able to keep him from coming into the cows. But what if they're already in amongst the cows, right? They're focused, they're hunting. Can we still stop that behavior? So when we're flying, often we're monitoring the cows because you can see their behavior response to it. And there are two wolves in and amongst this. There's one right there, and the other one's kind of right there. They're hunting right now. They're going through, they're figuring out which of these cows am I going to kill tonight, right? We start yelling at them right here, and you can see the one wolf on the right is already kind of peeling out. The other wolf over here on the left, he just stopped, right? That behavior changed. They're no longer hunting. Yeah, they're still amongst the cows, but they're not looking for something to eat anymore. They're like, all right, I'm busted. I'm out. It's not happening tonight, right? So we're able to change that behavior in an instant by yelling at these wolves. As he goes along, you see him he'll turn and look back like, oh, well, maybe I can go. We yell at him again, and they keep on going, right? So, but what about when they have the taste of blood in their mouth? Can you stop it then? Well, here we have an attack right here in the middle, and I'm trying to use my pointer on the computer. There's a steer right here, and he's got 1, 2, 3 wolves right here. We fly in, and you're going to see these. There's 2 that are literally on its hindquarters. You're going to see him pulling on the hindquarters. The one wolf's already kind of moving away. Maybe we've done this to him before, but we're going to come down and we're going to yell at these wolves here in just a second. And you're going to see the reaction. Hey, wolf, get out of here. Stop that. Probably some other words too, right? Yeah, immediately gone. Had the taste of blood in their mouth, and we stopped it, right? This is a cow. We called the producer. He went out the next morning, found that cow. It needed some doctoring, but it was fine, right? So we're able, that was a life that we saved right there with this drone, right? So really exciting stuff. With our drones, we were out there for another 85 nights. We had 51 interactions with wolves, and there were only 2 more depredations. And those 2 depredations happened when the pack split up, and we were flying drones up here, and they came around behind us over here and killed something, right? That's how they got around us. I don't remember the size of this pack. I can't remember right now.
Do they
but
get older if there's more predators in the group?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. But
Common, they're in bigger groups or smaller.
it depends on the prey base. If there's a lot of prey, like in Yellowstone, right after the reintroduction, they were seeing packs of 30 individuals because there were so many elk. They had plenty to choose from, and they could kill an elk every single day, or sometimes 2 a day, to feed that many mouths. There were enough. When there's fewer, they don't form those larger packs. Yeah.
How long did it take for you guys to keep doing that? Stop.
Like we were there for 85 nights, and then we kind of they had moved on to other things, right? So generally, you have these periods of time where it's worse because of puppies or because of whatever else, where the wolves are more tied to a den site or a rendezvous site, and they're trying to get a lot of food because they got to feed the puppies, and so that's when you tend to see more of the problems. But it's kind of different everywhere as to like the seasonality of what's going to be causing it and all that. So
Our listeners have asked if when someone asks a question, you could repeat the question.
oh yeah. So that question was how long it takes for them to stop coming. The previous question was how big a packs and what's kind of normal there. So we went from it's a 23 times reduction every other night before we started flying drones to every month and a half after we started flying drones. So, and this works for coyotes too. I know a lot of you are not from places with wolves. Here's a couple of coyotes that were up bothering this mama cow. We're coming in, and we can push them away just as easily. In fact, they're often really fun. Coyotes in this area get shot at a lot, and so we'll play recorded gunshots, and man, they just like, they're out of there like a light with that. Yeah, we've used music as well. So
The Flight of the Valkyrie.
we use AC/DC Thunderstruck, or Blue on Black by Five Finger Death Punch. That's another good one. Here's a black bear that we're able to chase away. So we've been able to do this with a lot of different predators, which is really exciting. So our ongoing research, relative costs and effectiveness. This is not just like a $500 drone from Best Buy. This is a $20,000 drone, right? You're flying a car in the sky. Yeah, you have to have an FAA license. And we as Wildlife Services, we're the only ones who are allowed to do this right now. And we have, it's like a full week of training, plus you have to have at least 20 hours of flight time on the sticks before you could go out and do this. And even then, you're not going to be very good at it. It takes hundreds of hours of flight time before you can really do this. How do the wolves and other wildlife respond? You know, where do they go after they're hazed? Is this just a leaf blower where we're pushing the problem into the neighbors? We don't want that. We want to be pushing them back into their natural areas where they're taking advantage of natural prey. And then habituation rate, as I talked about, they learn, they figure out. This is checking all of our boxes though. Proximity, unpredictability, adaptability. So far, 3 years in, we have not seen habituation. This is still an effective tool, which is really exciting. That's way longer than anything else we have. It really works, but it's really expensive. So we're not using this all the time everywhere, but this is when, excuse my French, when the shit hits the fan, that's when we're coming in with this, right? And then how is it going to work in other areas? This flat pasture bordered by trees, wolves come from the trees and into the pasture. Pretty simple. When you have more trees, it's a lot harder. When you have rougher terrain, it's a lot harder. Harder to find the wolves, harder to fly the drone, harder to get that proximity that we're wanting, right? So,
were you able to track cats, mountain lions, and bobcats?
Yes. So the question was, were we able to track mountain lions or bobcats? Yes, we have been seeing mountain lions and bobcats. We've not tried to haze them because they haven't been causing any problems. So we're just going to leave them be. But the current drone that we're flying actually has a laser rangefinder on it. And we can't see where that dot is with our eye, but apparently the cats can. Because just like your house cat, we've had a bobcat pouncing and chasing after our laser rangefinder, which was just super fun. So we have our toolbox. We've added a couple of new tools to this. That's my job, right? I'm always trying to add new tools because every situation is different. What tools we use for you are going to be different because you have different types of livestock, different numbers of livestock, different size of the area that you're working with, different predators, different types of predators, different numbers of predators, predator density. All of these things are different. And so we have to think about which of these are going to be the most effective for that particular situation, right? There is no golden silver bullet here. So I can take a couple of questions, but I want to make sure that I give Lindsay time because I went over on mine a little bit here. So, and I unfortunately have to leave right after Lindsay's done. So please write down my email address, dustin.ranglak@usda.gov. If you have further questions, I meant to bring business cards with me and I just early morning on a Saturday forgot. But please email me with any sort of questions that you have because I'm happy to talk more. So while we get things switched over, maybe I can do a couple of questions. Yeah. So the question was about livestock guardian dogs and how effective they are and what keeps people from using them. We have done a lot of research on that. We tested a bunch of different breeds because mostly people are using kind of like we call like the American white dog, right? That's worked really well when we had just coyotes, but in places where we now have wolves, we wanted to try some different breeds that come from places with wolves. So we've tested different breeds, the Kangal dog, the Transmontano, and there's one other. I can't think of it right now. No. I don't remember what it was. Anyway, they're very effective. All the dogs are more similar than they are different. Some work a little bit better than others. Some roam a little farther. They have different behaviors, but they all do a good job. Kind of depends on what you're dealing with specifically. But the biggest factor in whether they work or not is how well trained and how well bonded they are to your livestock. If they are well trained, well bonded, they're going to work great. If you just go and pick up a dog from, you see that there's a white dog at the pound and you pick it up and just drop it in with your sheep and expect that it's going to do something for you, it's not very effective. So you really got to think about that. I'll do one more. Again, they're territorial. And so they're smelling another dog's pee and they're thinking, who is this? I need to come investigate this. Do I have to get this animal out of here? It varies, I think. I mean, wolves and wolf urine does a good job of keeping coyotes out because they know that wolves will kill them. But yeah, so like so it's variable there. So, all right, I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay because I've taken too much of her time.